What's the most supernatural experience you've ever had? Story 1, January 1st, 2003. A stretch of road between two coastal towns in Australia. It was a dark and stormy night. No, really, it was. Driving along with my partner, I noticed a car coming up behind us, traveling fast. It was a single lane road, so we couldn't move over. I said to my partner, "This guy is in a hurry. Let him overtake you." My partner agreed, and he moved left as soon as there was an overtaking lane. The car pulled up beside us and then disappeared. There was nowhere it could have gone. We sat in silence for a few minutes, and I said, "Did you see that?" He said, "Yep." Story 2. When I was around 17, I got out of bed to go get my dog out of his kennel and feed him. As I passed one of the cabinets, a voice whispered in my ear, "Wake up." I could feel the breath and everything, and literally just froze for a few seconds, and ran upstairs telling myself, "What the repeatedly. It has messed with me to this day. I'd rather have heard absolutely anything else, because wake up just messes with you. Story 3. I had a dream that my dog had gone to a distant corner of our heavily wooded backyard and dug a hole to get out, which was odd because he wasn't a digger. He was stuck on the other side of the chain link fence because the hole was at a steep angle and he couldn't squeeze back through. I lifted the fence up enough for him to get back through. The next day, I got home and the yard was eerily quiet. He'd usually run up to greet me. I thought of the dream and walked straight to the corner where I found him waiting on the other side of the fence and let him in. Story 4. I saw my deceased ex-husband in my kitchen. I was watching TV in my living room in the middle of the day and kept hearing this sound, like someone was jiggling their change around, and it was loud, as if it were in the room with me. I paused my TV, yet the sound persisted, so I started to look around the room, and when I got to the kitchen, I saw him standing there. He was looking around as if taking stock of my apartment. Oh, and he was jiggling change in one hand, while flipping a quarter in between his fingers with the other hand. Something he did a lot when he was alive. He turned his head and saw me frozen, staring at him. The expression on his face was something I would never forget. His eyes got huge, and he kind of tilted his head forward, with the expression like, "You can see me?" I don't know how long we stared at each other for, but I turned away when I started to hear my cat ripping up the carpet again in the other room. When I turned back to my ex, he was gone. It's worth noting that he had only been dead for a couple of months. Some Romanian women I work with told me that the dead stick around for 3 months before crossing over. I don't know about all that, but I know without a shadow of a doubt what I saw that day. Story 5. When I was between the ages of 4 and 6, I used to see a little blonde boy through this mirrored armoire in my parents' bedroom. The armoire was big and wooden, but had mirrored accents and mirrors running all the way around the base. If I laid on the carpet in front of it and looked into the mirrors on the bottom, sometimes I'd see a little blonde boy in a red sweater in the corner of the room, far away and a little distorted, but still very clear. He would sit with his back to me, looking out the windows to the backyard. I don't remember ever seeing his face. I don't think I saw him many times, but I do remember his image very clearly. In my little kid mind, I thought I invented this super neat mirror trick by myself, so I tried to get my parents to see it too. They always refused, and my mom especially would get super mad at me for asking. I stopped seeing the boy when I stopped playing in their bedroom as much, and new mirrors shouldn't work like that. When I got older, I chalked it up to my overactive kid brain. Didn't think much of it, to be honest. Years and years later, when I was an adult and long after my parents had sold that house, my mom asked me about the armoire out of the blue, then told me that she used to see the little boy too. Not in the mirrors, but sometimes just out of the corners of her eyes. Like she'd be cooking and catch a glimpse of blonde hair passing by her hips, at a kid's height. And occasionally in dreams. It didn't happen too often, but just enough to deeply freak them out. So when I mentioned seeing the same little boy, my mom was just terrified herself. There was other strange stuff in that house, but this was 100% the most vivid I remember. Story 6. When I was 16, an uncle, Dad's brother, passed unexpectedly. Weeks later, I had a dream about him, and he told me to quit smoking cigarettes. It was way more involved, but it's been 20 plus years, so I don't remember the rest. A month or so later, I mentioned the dream to my parents, and my dad started crying, got up, and walked away. Apparently, he dreamt of talking to his brother too, and he told my dad that he, uncle, needed to talk to me. Story 7. I worked for an online retailer warehouse for a few months. There were two depressing windows that obviously were the bare minimum required for zoning that I probably walked by 1,000 times a day. Outside, you'd see a concrete retaining wall and some trucks. Obviously, after a while, I'd barely see out of my periphery. Wall, trucks, trucks, wall. Until one day, I saw trucks, and then in the second window, pigs. It was only a second, but I definitely saw a bunch of massive pigs fenced in areas, with rolling hills beyond. Of course, when I looked back, there were no pigs. For the next few weeks, I stared out the windows when I went past, always seeing nothing but that wall. It was only when I got lazy and stopped paying attention that it happened again. Pigs, hill, then look back, and gone. Story 8. I used to do pest control. Went to a customer's business for the first time. As I walked in the office, I noticed some pictures that were supposed to be hanging on the wall were on the ground, and then I saw some papers which looked like they had been thrown and scattered off a desk. I picked everything up so I could apply treatment to the floorboards and surrounding rooms. I then went to the only restroom in the office. I simply knocked on the door as a courtesy, as I always do before entering any restroom. There was no reply because nobody was in there, so I went and applied treatment to the restroom, and I closed the door behind me. As I walked away from the door, I know I heard somebody grab the door handle, twist it open, and open the door. I turned around and looked to see nobody behind me but a door swinging open. The hair on my neck instantly stood up, and I put two and two together. I grabbed my and ran downstairs. The receptionist saw me and started laughing. She asked me if I had met their little friend upstairs. Story 9. My husband and I were traveling through New South Wales, Australia, and stayed at a lovely motel. In the morning, we went down to breakfast, and most of the other people had already left, so we were almost done. Suddenly, a glass flew across an empty table and landed on the floor. I was facing that direction and fully saw it as if it was pushed across the table. I looked behind me at the only other couple, and they were wide-eyed and confused. Apparently, the motel has a permanent resident that likes attention. Story 10. I've posted about this before, but when I was about 9 years old, 1995, in the middle of a bright summer day, I went to the refrigerator to get a popsicle. Suddenly, a roughly teenage-looking guy with long brown hair, wearing a beige turtleneck and red plaid bell-bottoms, turned around the corner into the hallway to my left, then vanished from toe to head as I looked at him. Told no one about it for years, until after my mother mentioned meeting the now-grown kids who lived in the house before us, who asked her if she'd seen the bell-bottom ghost. Story 11. This happened to me when I was around 19, and still living with my mom. 'Twas the night before Three Kings Day. I was fast asleep in bed, when suddenly I woke up with the loud thought in my head screaming, "You're not alone." I was facing the wall, and all my hair stood on end. I started hearing what sounded like clothes rustling, like someone was moving quietly in my room. I was scared shitless, but at that point it's like, well, damn, now I have to look. And when I did, I saw at the foot of my bed something that looked to be around 3 feet tall, wearing a white coat. I at myself and did the only thing a 19-year-old brave woman can do. I hid under the covers and turned on the TV. When I looked again, it was gone. I called my then boyfriend to tell him what I saw. He laughed and said it was one of the Three Kings. Idiot. Next morning, I walked downstairs and my mom and stepdad are having breakfast. I told them what I saw, and my mom just gave me the weirdest look as I told my story. When I was done, she just told my stepdad, "Tell her about my dream." And he says, "What, were you dreamt with that exact same thing?" Yeah, I at myself a second time. She had a dream that same night where small white-robed creatures were trying to bother her, like little imps or something. What came in my room also went through my mother's dreams. Story 11. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw this strange spotlight appear on my wall. It was a circle made up of a bunch of bright circular dots within it. It came on strong, then rotated 90 degrees, and then turned off. It was so surreal because the light was extremely bright, and yet it was also focused on that one spot on my wall. When I woke up the next morning, I couldn't get the image out of my head, but I just assumed I must have dreamt it. My sister and I were talking over breakfast, and she said, "I had this dream last night that my entire room suddenly lit up with these circular dots floating around my room." I got really excited. "That actually happened! I woke up and saw it too!" My sister froze. "How is that possible? My blinds are completely shut." Chills to this day. Story 12. My house was built in the mid-1800s as a farmstead, and over the last 20 years that my family has occupied it, we've made various renovations to it. One thing we discovered while gutting the last unrenovated room in the house was that some of the struts and paneling was charred, as if there had been a particularly bad fire in that room. Later on, my brother told me that he had seen a pair of feet that looked burnt running through the house late at night a few years ago. I was incredulous and ready to disbelieve him when I realized that I had experienced something similar a long time ago. When I was a child around Christmas time, I decided to see if I could stay up and hide at the top of the stairs to catch a glimpse of Santa. At around 1 a.m., after I knew everyone was asleep, I crept to the staircase to see a pair of dark feet walk from the kitchen to the living room in front of the bottom of the steps. My parents were definitely asleep, so I had assumed it was Santa and excitedly went to bed. Now, I'm not sure what it was, but rather something more in line with what my brother saw some years later. Story 13. One time, me and my husband were watching TV in our living room. He decided to kick his shoes off while sitting on the couch, and both shoes landed in front of the TV stand, on the floor, and on their sides. About 30 minutes into the TV show we were watching, one of his shoes out of the blue moved upwards by itself. I froze up on the couch, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw my husband staring at his shoe looking startled. Then I said to my husband, "Did you see that?" He replied, "Yeah." My eyes started to get really huge, and he saw that I was about ready to flip out, and he said, "It's okay, calm down, I'll burn some cedar." So then he did, and all felt well again. We're native, so we just smudged that out of our house. Story 14. This will probably be lost, but one night I was driving from North Dakota to Nebraska, and I was passing through a section of South Dakota that sits between the Rosebud and Pine Ridge reservations. I was in the absolute middle of nowhere. No lights for miles, perfectly clear winter sky, amazing stars. And all of a sudden, a meteor burned up in the sky above, turning the entire sky green for a few seconds. I stopped and just thought about how lucky I was to see that. As I keep driving, I come up to a small town where the only intersection is a four-way stop in the middle of town. I assumed it was a ghost town because there were no lights of any kind. But as I came to a stop, my car lights lit up the area around me, and people were just walking around in the dark, acting like it was normal. It's the middle of the night, maybe 10 or 20 degrees max. Needless to say, I didn't stop again until I got to a town with street lamps. I think those areas are a little more wild or spiritual. Wounded Knee was near there, and that part of the US had terrible atrocities committed against the natives. I think it left its mark on that place. Story 15. On vacation in London, riding the tube with my dad. I am about 12 to 14 years old. A woman in her 30s kept looking at me, and after 5 to 10 minutes, I looked directly in her eyes and said in my head, "Can you read my mind?" She smiles and nods. I keep looking at her until we reach our station. She stays in the train when we leave, and nothing has happened ever since. Every time I have experienced something that could be categorized as supernatural, there's been an explanation. But this one still hangs on in my mind, and I'm 31 now. Story 16. When I was 17, Back before the internet, answering machines, and cell phones, my family went to Canada for vacation, and I stayed home to work my summer job. They were supposed to be gone for 7 days, but on the 7th day, I got a postcard from my mother that they decided to visit friends in Vermont and would be back 2 days later than planned. When they walked in the door 2 days later, as expected, they were all apologetic that they were gone 2 extra days without telling me. I said, "You did tell me. I got your postcard 2 days ago." My mother said, "We didn't send a postcard. We decided to stop on the way home. So even if we sent a postcard, it wouldn't have arrived yet." "But I've got the postcard right here," I said, reaching for the stack of mail on the counter. Looking through it, I could find no postcard. I must have dreamt that she sent it to let me know. Story 17. When I was in middle school, everyone knew my home was haunted. I had told some friends who eventually became curious and asked to come over and visit. So my 2 friends came over. One was my very best friend and my first crush. The other was another girl from school who was kind of an evil little but I had a complicated home life and didn't have many friends. Anyway, we hung out a bit while myself and my mom told them stories of our haunting. Evil little girl, Alicia, decided that stories weren't enough. She interrupted the stories to adamantly demand that we summon the devil. Before any of us could shut her up, a terrible scream or growl emitted from the TV set and seemed to be inside my head at the same time. Alicia pissed her pants. My mom gave her a pair of my pants, and she never came over again. My crush, on the other hand, braved it out for a while, but none of my relationships lasted very long until I got out of that house. Story 18. Obligatory not me. Although I have had a few, but my grandma recently told me that my great-grandfather, my grandfather's father who has passed away, has this old as balls radio that was given to them after he died. Once they inherited it, they decided to get the old thing running again. They got everything running, turned it on, and it started playing music from the 1920s. It wasn't set to an old-timey station. There was nothing inside of it. It just played. My great-grandpa died on December 31st, 2002, his birthday. That radio was roughly 80 years old, hadn't been plugged in forever, and just did that. Edit. So, something really weird happened last night at about 2:30 a.m. I was listening to music and scary conspiracy theories when suddenly I heard a humming. I kinda tried to drown it out, but it nevertheless freaked me out. I chalked it up to someone's Blu-ray player acting up again, and went to bed. Well, I woke up this morning, and lo and behold, I hear my mom talking about how her hairdryer went off by itself. It's never done that before, so I'll try to keep tabs on it. Story 19. When I finished my O-levels, me and my 2 friends decided to have a walk in the park. During the walk, it suddenly started to rain. We were in the middle of the field with no shelter anywhere near us. So we decided to just keep walking, despite seeing heavy rain on all sides. As we kept walking, none of us got any water on us. Not a drop. It might be possible that we somehow walked between 2 different rains. I don't know. But it was still the most extraordinary thing that happened to me. Story 20. I was in 8th grade and at school around 8 p.m. for a big school event. As part of the event, they let us roast marshmallows for s'mores. I didn't have any friends there, so I was by myself waiting to be able to get a marshmallow and was looking up at the night sky. About maybe 50-ish feet above was this glowing green orb, roughly smaller than a volleyball, and it was zigzagging pretty fast in the sky until it just disappeared. I live in New England. By this time in the year, bugs are all gone, and fireflies are very small and never have a constant glow, and never have I seen a bug zigzag like that. Still not sure what it was, but I like knowing that there are things out there that cannot be explained.